I speak about the future of work, and I see it like this. I think the future of work is learning. I'm going to walk you through a presentation that gives you my thesis on that, shows you some macro trends, talks you through what it means to an organization, which is really a collection of individuals, and then more specifically what it means to the individual. I'm going to hand it off to Gary, who's going to dive more deeply into what the exponential changes in technology are taking place and some evidence of them, and his deep history of looking at careers. So we're going to start off with an exercise. If you could, please, stand up if you are working in the field of your undergraduate major. Okay? Statistically in the US, that's less than a third of people. Yet we are myopically focused on that. We tell people, what do you want to be when you grow up? You ask people, what do you want to be when you grow up? What's your major going to be? We get people myopically focused on a single major. You guys have a little bit more than average. The other thing I want to ask you is stand up if the first question you ask people when you meet them is, so what do you do? Be honest. Okay. Not to pick on you, but I'm going to explain why I think that's a problem. So here's my thesis. The world of work used to look like this. It existed in three bands: education, career, retire. Whether you went to university or not, all your education was pushed to that first third of your life. Career was getting that first good step on an escalator, which you rode up, till when you retired and collect your pension, and frankly died a year later. It was by design. When Bismarck first set it up, I think 7% of people actually live long enough to collect their pension. Success measures for HR professionals, success measures in higher ed was, could you prove the learning? Could you get a good job? That was, could you get your first step on the escalator? That's really all they were worried about. Now I think it looks like this. Life expectancy is pushed further out. It's not 90 yet, but it will be soon. Education becomes learning. That's different for me for a reason. Education suggests becoming educated, an end state. Learning suggests continuous. Learning overlaps with leveraging. It's no longer career because they're one act. And then retirement becomes, unfortunately, longevity. So it starts to look like this. The career escalator is gone. It's now a web that you must navigate, dipping back in and out of learning. Learning is something that happens outside of work as well as something that happens very much inside of work. Success measures here are your learning agility and your adaptability, your ability to learn and adapt to various changing circumstances, to new jobs, et cetera. And this is my personal mantra. We need to retire these questions. What do you want to do when you grow up? We ask kids that. If the Bureau of Labor Statistics was right in 1999, 65% of the jobs haven't even been created yet. So we're limiting their potential imagination. 47% of work, not jobs. It's a contested figure, but a large portion of the work that we do can be replaced by technology in the next 20 years or so. What's your major? 27% is the statistics we have on people actually working in the field of their undergraduate major. So if you have kids out there and you're asking them to pick a good major and stay in your major and don't go outside those lanes, you might be limiting their potential. And then what do you do? The best research I've seen on this was done by the Foundation for Young Australians, and they say that young people graduating today will have 17 different jobs across 5 different industries. So if you're defining yourself from the age of 5 on by one goal and one job, you're limiting your potential. And I think humans have a lot of potential, so I'm optimistic about our future. So the reason I call the group that I work with Work to Learn is in the past, I believe we learned one thing in order to work doing that one thing, and we defined ourselves by that one thing. And now we're going to have to work in order to learn continuously. It's a mindset shift. So the macro context for this, I've just got a little bit of information. I think Gary's got much more depth on this. We're now entering what's called the 4th Industrial Revolution. Have you heard of that? Most of you guys have heard of that? Okay. So I walk people through, it's basically the first industrial revolution was a steam engine, then electricity and mass production, computer and automation, and now cyber-physical. The interesting thing, I think, is the shift in how we value talent and the fact that each of these industrial revolutions build on each other so they can happen much more quickly. So things like Internet of Things wasn't possible until we had internet. But now that we have internet and that we have near ubiquity in some areas, we can have smart homes and things like that. You just saw somebody answering a question based on the device they were wearing. It doesn't look like anybody's going to be wearing it anytime soon. But how much of our education is spent memorizing some of those things? I think learning in struggling through those processes of memorization and understanding are important, but we've lost our way in terms of focusing on content regurgitation and skills transfer as opposed to actual learning. We're also entering the 5th era in human history. Started with the hunter-gatherer era. Each era is marked by a time span. Those time spans are getting closer together. It's how we use talent, how we value talent, and how we use tools. We shouldn't lose sight of the fact that this technology are just tools. They're just more sophisticated tools. And humans, they're in support of humans. They're in service to humans, not the other way around. We've lost our way with that. In time, we're between the augmented era and the information era. Our mental models are stuck between the industrial and the information era. And if I just zoom in on that, we're still focused on acquired knowledge and skill. We're still codifying and transferring skills to get that first good job, as opposed to developing the learning agility and the resiliency to navigate through many jobs. In the information era, you had to learn the tool in order to use it. You had to learn that software package in order to get the leverage out of it. Now we're going to be learning from and with tools. Have you heard of generative design? Some of you, maybe not. Generative design is, so if I wanted to design this clicker, my undergraduate degree happens to be in industrial design, I would draw a picture of it, I would describe the functionality of it, I'd have an engineering drawing of it, we'd decide the mechanicals of it, to come up with this shape that I would have picked as a human. I would have decided this is the right shape for someone's hand. Generative design is to say, let's look at a million hands maybe, let's look at the functionality, and let's give the success criteria to the computer of what we want this device to do. How much it weighs, how much it costs, its environmental impact. And the machine spits out 300 options for the physical form. And the humans never define the physical form, just the characteristics of it. So then the human curates. That's learning from and with the tool. That's one example, there'll be many others. Do you know what this is? It's a Roomba automatic floor vacuum. What does it have to do with anything? Well, there was an interview about 6 months ago with a CEO where he had said, I could sell floor pans of your home. Everyone went crazy. What he meant was, our devices are capturing the floor maps of your home. Not that we're going to sell the floor maps of your home. That wasn't his point. His point was, when we go to make smart homes, we're thinking ahead. Our product isn't necessarily just about the vacuum cleaner. It's about the data we're collecting for the future. And I can go through many other examples of companies like that. Amazon is certainly one of them. It's not the product they sell you, it's the data that they're collecting and how they're learning about you. So every company will become a data company, and every company will become a learning company. So how does all this change work? I think that I use the 3 A's. I think there are 3 forces impacting work right now. The first one is atomization. Jobs being broken into job fragments that can be done anywhere around the world, particularly digital jobs. So Uber, I'm sure you all know what Uber is. Caliant used to go by the name Hourly Nerd, which frankly made more sense to me, but they have atomized the work of McKinsey and Bain. So instead of hiring McKinsey and Bain for $1 million contract, you can hire a top-tier MBA for an hour or 2 hours for a fraction of that cost. Atomization of work is not just low-skilled labor. It's going to happen to high-skilled labor, and it's already started. Automation, you've probably heard of it. You've interacted with a chatbot before. Automated Insights is a company that works off of Watson, and it basically takes a pile of data, particularly financial information or sports scores, and generates a narrative story. So next time you're reading your favorite baseball score, or if you happen to read your financial reports, through Reuters or the AP, look at the bottom, it may say generated by Automated Insights. And then augmentation. Augmentation is extending the potential of the human. So if it's using Watson to read MRIs and give advice to the doctors where they collaborate on what the best course is, or it's physical augmentation, this is the Da Vinci robot. That's been around for a long time, but it will allow a surgeon to do more precise laparoscopic surgeries. I've had a Da Vinci surgery. It was great. So our world was complicated, and we still operate like it is. We break subject matter down into subcomponents, which is an artificial way of separating knowledge into chunks that we can codify and transfer into other humans to create a deployable workforce. Organizations are still complicated. And what that means is, if you're the boss and you've got 45 people under you or 500 people under you, chances are good you've sat in many of the chairs they've sat in. So if it came to make a decision, you had most of the knowledge and you could do it with certainty. Now we've got so much change, I say it's more complex. So if you're a leader in an organization, you may be hiring people who have knowledge and skills and experience that you don't have. You have to think differently about how you make decisions. You have to think differently about how you organize your people and collaborate with them. So what do? We must think differently. I think we've started thinking machine-like in the last 20, 30 years. We need to start thinking more human-like. You saw in that video what a machine can do with a human. We've acted like the opposite. Since I've been speaking, I bet more than half the room's phones buzzed at least once. Have you paid attention to it? Have you thought, I wonder if that is? I wonder if I need to respond to it? You're responding to the machines, not the other way around. So in addition to the industrial revolutions and the eras, there are also zones. And zones are how you think and feel about things. So there's the comfort zone, like hopefully you're in it right now. This is not stressing you out too much. Then there's the panic zone. If I said you're all fired, that would be a panic moment. And somewhere in the middle is the learning zone. And we're not spending enough time in the learning zone. So a balance of this, sort of, I had my education, it's over, I have my job now, I'm in comfort, quickly becomes that when things change. So we need to pay attention to these zones because, the slide looks like it went over itself, but you go from the learning zone to the comfort zone much like you do when you work out. So when you work out and you lift weights, you stretch your muscles till they tear, they get time to rest and build back stronger. Learning is like that. You push yourself, struggle to understand something, go through something different, and then go back to the comfort zone to rest, reflect, and make sense of that learning. So it's not like you got to avoid the comfort zone. It's an important part of learning. But you want to avoid the panic zone as much as possible. Nothing productive happens in the panic zone. You're going to have to get comfortable being a little more uncomfortable because learning is going to take place in more places and more frequently. You're going to have to stretch and adapt. You're going to have to be resilient. So for HR managers or professionals looking to get a job, this is the old formula for it. You got a credential of some sort, and maybe a degree, or maybe you didn't go to university, you got another type of training. You had talent and skills that were evidenced somehow. They could have been in your transcript, they could have been an internship, they could have been on a prior job. And if you had those two things, you were sort of a desirable employee. And the employee mindset was, this is my job, I earned it, and I'm entitled to it. Unfortunately, that's going away. Now I think it's more a cultural fit. What's your purpose? What gets you up every day? Why are you guys here? Why do you work for the World Bank? What's the World Bank's mission, and how does it reflect your own values? Still have to have raw talent and skills. We do need talent, we need skills, we need trained individuals, we need people who understand how to do very complex things. But I think the multiplier is learning agility and adaptability because the conditions of your work are going to change. And that collectively makes the high value talent so that the employee position becomes, how do I fulfill my purpose? And how do I create value? How do I add value to the organization I'm in? So as individuals, we have had a lot more information coming at us every day. This is research by the University of Southern California. Newspapers are an easy increment to understand. They say in the 1980s we had about 40 newspapers of content coming at us every day. It became 174, and now it's 280. It's probably even higher since he did that study. And something's happened. Internet, the smartphone, more content coming at us. Our attention spans declined. So Microsoft did the study. I don't know how they did it, but they said in the early 2000s it was 12 seconds, and then after the smartphone it became 8 seconds. Bad news I have for you is a goldfish has a 9-second attention span. I don't know how they know that either. So what have we done in response to this is we've started employing filters Sometimes we're conscious of it, sometimes we're not. Every time you read a story on your phone through an app that curates your news, it's funneling further and further and further into a finer point what information you see. We are now becoming more aware of what happened on Facebook during the last election, but more and more information is getting pushed at you based upon some sort of profile you've developed because you took a quiz to say, do I look like this, painting? As a result, we're not getting as broad of information as we once got. We're getting very catered information. And as a result, Anne-Marie Slaughter says we are creating tribes. We can't talk to it anymore. We can't listen to each other anymore. We are in cohesive networks where we're not sharing information. It's keeping us from growing. It's keeping us from learning. And it's the red state, blue state problem in the US. It's causing many other polarizations around the world. What we need to do is create conscious bridging networks. Have people in your network who are different from you, whether it's age or culture or geography or income or education. Intentionally try to understand them, intentionally try to help them understand you. Collectively, I think that what we need is what I call an Agile learning mindset. I've built curriculum for this at multiple institutions. It's basically learning agility, the ability to learn, unlearn, and relearn, understanding your learning styles. It's a focus on the uniquely human skills, empathy, social emotional intelligence, creativity, communication, critical thinking. It's adaptability. How do you navigate ambiguity? How do you handle change? And it's agency. It's that opposite of hopelessness. It's knowing that you are the master of your fate. You're in charge of your future. Another massive study was done by the Institute for the Future, and they identified 10 skills for the future. This organization called the Fourth Industrial Revolution has taken those skills, put them into 3 clusters, and made a series of lessons around them. They call it, first you have to understand the art of the humanness, navigating in the new world, and working with bots. And it's taking sort of the first piece of it is the uniquely human skills, the second piece of it is the learning agility and adaptability, and the third piece of it is working with technology. So you can't have innovation without sticky notes, I guess, right? So Jeff Hoffman, who I will tell you who he is in a second, he's an individual who said that he dedicates at least 15 minutes every day to learning something about which he knows nothing. It cannot connect to any of his businesses or interests or degrees, just something completely random. Because he takes the Steve Jobs thing seriously, you can't connect the dots looking forward, so you can only look at them, connect them looking backwards. If Steve Jobs hadn't studied calligraphy, we would not have fonts in a Mac. But there was no way to know that at the time. So Jeff decided to study fruit at one point in time, and he noticed that you have 5 days to sell a banana. He was also reading, in one of his other days, about the problems with the airlines, that they had empty seats flying around all the time, and there just wasn't anything they could do about it. And from that, he developed Priceline. He has a great TED Talk, he calls this info sponging, and I do it myself. So I have a philosophy on sort of how we should think about our careers. So you have your current role and how you define yourself, which I suggest you question. Defining yourself by your career, defining yourself by your company. Try to think of defining yourself by your purpose, your passion, how you add value that doesn't tie necessarily to a title or a company. You're going to shed tasks that become atomized or automated. You probably have already done it without realizing you're doing it. Every time you shed something, you should reach up and grab something else, maybe from your info sponging. Then you should be looking at available technologies that allow you to extend your human potential, and that collectively creates your new role. In some industries, this could happen every 18 months. In other industries, it could happen every decade. And it's a rinse and repeat. So it's no longer, I got my degree, I'm sitting on the escalator. It's really, this is how you traverse the web. And in organizations, if you look at the human potential over time, and the collective human potential in the organization is their capacity, these become learning tours of duty, and you incorporate that learning back into the organization. So in summary, I think it used to look like this. You learned something, you worked, you produced a unit of value. That was it, pretty simple. Now I think there's so much change, so much ability to unleash the potential of humanity that our learning systems need to be learning how to learn, learning how specifically you learn. learning and work become a single act, combined act. The unit of value becomes a byproduct, and the goal really becomes increasing your capacity. So the Roomba at the beginning or the discussions at Amazon, how are you, every day, how are you learning? In the medical community, they have a post-mortem. We should be doing that in work every day. What happened when a project went well, when it didn't go well? What did we learn? What are we doing with that learning? How are we socializing that learning to the rest of the organization? And then another way to look at this is the concept of life blocks. This is something that I discovered. Gary's father, Dick Bowles, who wrote What Color is Your Parachute, actually came upon this in the 1970s. So he was way ahead of me. Because whenever you think you have an idea, you got to find out actually somebody else had it, you just didn't know it. So life existed like this: education, work, retire. We kind of moved through it like that for, on average, 73 years. Now I think they flip on 90 degrees. Educate becomes, work becomes engage, learn becomes lifelong, retire becomes recondition, and we need, the span becomes 90 years, and then we need to move in and out of that differently, and we need systems that will help us move in and out of that differently. So, in summary, we're entering an era where lifelong learning will be a norm. Our uniquely human skills should be highly valued. This is a shift from focusing on just extracting value out of production and value creation and learning. Culture and capacity become the North Star. So product and brand are outputs, culture and capacity are the inputs. Focus on the inputs. You're going to go from managing workers doing tasks in that complicated world to leading change in the complex world and helping all your workers deal with this adaptation. There's a human loss of identity when you can't say, this is what I do anymore, when that's the first question at the cocktail party. We have to think about how we define ourselves differently. And then, my mantra is from learning to work, to working to learn. So with that, I want to thank you very much, and I think we're going to shift to Gary now, and you want to come up?